Hello, and thank you for joining us here on the Quiet Connections podcast. I'm Hayley, and I want to welcome you to a fascinating conversation with Lara Hayward that will touch on aligning our careers with our values and who we are, championing our quieter qualities at work, celebrating motherhood as a high-performance role, the natural world's ability to shape how we feel about ourselves, and the ripple effect of world-class athletes speaking out and prioritising their mental health over other people's expectations. As an ex-lawyer involved in the NHS and Paralympic sport, and now a career coach at Oxford University and a Blue Health coach, Lara is one of those people with a career that will make you think, wow, she must be super confident. So I am thrilled that Lara is sharing her behind-the-scenes story and her insights with us in this episode. You may have already met Lara if you attended one of her career workshops this summer, and if not, I'll be sharing a link to these at the end of the episode so that you don't miss out. But first, let's hear from Lara. Welcome to the Quiet Connections podcast, Lara.
Thanks, Hayley. It's lovely to see you again. Thanks for having me on.
I'm so excited to talk to you. Could you begin by just sharing a little bit about your story and how you can relate to feeling socially anxious and not good enough?
Oh, I can indeed. Where to start? I know when I worked with you on the careers workshop, we sort of went right back, I think, to the time when I was working as a lawyer. And I think at that time, I very much had a sort of extrovert mask on, and a lot about being a lawyer, certainly in litigation, I think is about performing, and some people do that very well. But I think for me, I realized over the course of my career, I probably did it well, in inverted commas, for a while, and then just was starting to feel absolutely exhausted by it. And I knew it was because part of that work role wasn't really aligned with my values and who I was. And I felt like I was having to be much more kind of loud in that the broadest sense than sort of what I'd ordinarily be.
Yeah.
But I suppose if I think about, being quiet, it starts way before that. When I was younger, I was very much one of those sort of dreamy kids. I used to read all the time. I was constantly outside, sort of running around and just in my own little dream world and being very active and artistic and those kind of things. And I was quite happy there. And then, I guess probably at school it changed, because you kind of go through that whole thing about fitting in and sort of being someone you're not. And I think after, and I can only reflect on this now, you look back and I think after I left law and then sort of did a lot of work on realigning, I suppose, work with my values, but also, what comes with that is looking at sort of who you are. And I realized that I was actually a much quieter person and more introverted, and I actually just really sort of value that now and kind of work with it rather than against it. So it's been a long old road to kind of get realigned, but it's really good and kind of feeling much more like myself, so I can just embrace that now.
Yeah. And tell us a little bit about the work that you were doing.
The work that I was doing as a lawyer, more recently. I qualified into private practice and ended up working in the healthcare team. So a lot of my clients were NHS trusts. And it was really interesting work intellectually, quite tough at times. We did a lot of inquests, a lot of public inquiries, judicial review, dealing with sort of really thorny medical law issues. So often, really looking into the moral side of law, I guess, as opposed to sort of pure law and pure rules. There's, I think in healthcare law, there's a huge element of that. But within that, sort of quite a lot of adversarial work. We were in the High Court a lot. And although I wasn't doing everyone thinks lawyers are the wig and gown people, they're barristers, and not what I was doing. I was a solicitor, so kind of sat behind them. But in terms of having to be on it for that kind of work, you really, really do. And there's kind of a lot of pressure and a lot of stress. And I think some of my friends or colleagues who do that work, I have the utmost respect for them. But I think I just found it yeah, just for me, I just felt like there's this constant pressure to perform and this constant sense of stress that if you got something wrong, you could be struck off effectively, and that happens rarely, in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
But I think I just felt so much pressure to do the work well and right, which is a good thing. But I think balancing that with the things I also need in life to keep myself kind of well and healthy, I found quite tough.
Yeah.
And I was working at a good firm and with good people, and didn't have sort of crazy city hours like I know a lot of lawyers do. But yeah, I think I only realized again afterwards, when you're dealing with things like prison inquests, and sort of going into the details of that, it can be quite tough, and it can sort of I think, because I'm quite a sensitive person, that sort of stuff stays with you and it's quite hard to switch off. But from the healthcare stuff, I moved, I then became in-house counsel at a health regulator, and from there then I moved into sport, and I worked as a lawyer at UK Sport, which is the sort of funding agency for Olympic and Paralympic sport. And that was it was a nice fit. I think the background for my skills, I worked with a really good team. I still miss a lot of the people who I work with there. And a better fit for me, but I think I knew then that if I wasn't going to kind of stay or want to be a sort of lawyer in sport, then it was probably time to kind of leave law and find something that was that I found more purposeful. I think that's probably what ultimately culminated in me leaving.
Okay, I'm going to ask you in a minute about what you're up to now, but I just want to highlight the reason that I've asked you to sort of talk about your career history. Because I think you're one of those people that I would have been looking at going, you're amazing, you're successful, you're confident, you are totally like a total different breed to me. And I just want to highlight that actually you still had those kind of anxieties and self-doubt and everything under the surface. And even people that we see that who are successful, and you were very successful, it doesn't take away that fear.
Oh God, no. And it's really strange, like when people, I mean, I don't feel like I've been successful at all, and I still, massive imposter syndrome. When I compare myself to anyone, I get all of those thoughts and feelings like, well, what have I done? What have I contributed to the world? And not in a woe is me sense, just in that, I think we live in a world where all of us are constantly comparing ourselves to everyone on a global scale. We didn't have to do that, sort of 20, 30 years ago. And it's just this sort of constant pressure. So thank you for sort of saying that, but I genuinely mean it when I've never felt that. And I think I've always felt like a fraud and always kind of, don't wonder what my skills are. I know we've spoken about this before, my current role, building up to sort of speaking in public, it's always a huge thing. I get massive nerves. I think when I was a lawyer, I can say this now because I've been out of it for long enough, if I had to do certain types of public speaking, I'd probably try and, do all sorts of things to get out of it. And then, it and it just made me feel like I was back at school again. It's crazy when I look back now, to all of that stuff. But I think that just shows me that there was something either not quite right about me being in that role, and or something that I probably needed to face and navigate and sort of push through, which I think I have done, but in a healthy way, rather than in a, oh, this is something wrong with me, I need to sort it out kind of way. It's certainly the public speaking element. It's more, I've looked at it much more as, okay, well, what am I happy, talking in public about? Where do I have confidence? And I think if you look at it in that way, you can find areas that that you can be a really passionate and really articulate speaker, for example. So sort of flipping it on its head and working out how to use your skills to their advantage, I think.
Absolutely. That has been my experience as well. I've been able to stand up in front of hundreds of people and talk about, social anxiety and mental health. But I couldn't interview a senior executive for a podcast about careers in my last job. So I think it's very different. Your heart has to be connected. So tell us a little bit about where your heart lies now.
Where my heart lies now? Wow. Probably in too many areas. I think it's definitely in the sort of well-being, personal development, coaching space. And I have the privilege of working with some amazing students at Oxford. I also, and that's doing career coaching across all subject areas, but I specialize in creative industries and sustainability, which is so closely aligned, to what I love. If I think about it, sort of the natural environment, conservation, and creativity, they do form my values. All of the stuff I do outside of work has elements of that in it. So it's amazing to be able to work with people who are looking for sort of support and guidance in those areas. I think, branching out from that into the well-being space, and I'm really interested sort of the intersect of work and well-being, but also how do we perform well, and what do we need to perform well? And I think we're seeing a lot more of that happening in sort of general conversations in work, in the sort of public sphere, in medicine, healthcare, and sort of, I suppose, individual responsibility for how we sort of look after ourselves and manage ourselves, and what we can do if there are, I suppose, resource restrictions or limitations. So I'm really interested in that space, and then connecting it all with purpose, I think, and that's the element that's often missing in a number of spheres. So I think I've always been one of those people that looks at everything really holistically, and really believes in sort of circular economy type structures, and how there are certain things that can operate in certain spheres that and give something back as well. It doesn't all need to be geared towards, say, just profit making or just this. So I think all of the work that I'm doing at the moment probably falls into those areas. And it's an exciting place to be, and it's sort of constantly evolving as well. And just really nice to have that mix, I think, which is something I didn't have in law. It's very narrow tranches, and obviously you're dealing with rules and regulations, like that's what it is to be a lawyer. And I think that's the one thing I've realized, like, I'm such a not rules person. It's like I very much like looking at what is possible rather than what people can't do. So I think that's another sort of values fit, and that's where I am now.
That's so nice. So a lot of people then have trouble seeing where their quieter, more sensitive qualities actually fit in at work, and they feel like it's a little bit of a disadvantage. And I think sometimes the workplace almost gives you the message that it is a disadvantage and somehow you're not good enough. So what advice would you give to those people?
I found myself talking about sort of values quite a lot, but I think if you have a sense, and this would probably be my advice, of getting really close to who you are, and if you kind of know you're quiet, but also know where your quiet gives you strength and how it can benefit you, I think that there sort of comes a time where you just have to really back yourself in that and value it. Because I think certainly in sort of more corporate workplaces I've worked, although again I think it's changing, I really do think it's changing. There's always been this sense that you have to be a certain way, and we all need to develop our confidence, and we need to do this, and we need to do X, Y, Z. And I kind of just reject that now, because people are just not the same, and I think cultures flourish when we're able to be ourselves, within reason, and as long as it's kind of furthering the business aim. But to further a business aim, you need to really look after your people, and people need to feel sort of supported, engaged, like they really want to sort of do the work that they do. So I think so it comes back to like knowing who you are, really valuing what you can give, and then not being afraid to kind of champion that in your own way at the workplace. And that there's always going to be, I don't know, just thinking of my sort of network, friends, family, other connections, and they all do different things. But everyone will moan broadly about the same thing, if they're in a team meeting, particularly on Zoom, and that's obviously been sort of amplified over the pandemic. There'll always be 2 or 3 people who've got the loudest voices, who speak more than everyone else. And there's part of me that will say, sort of let them get on with that. But if you do have a really valid point to make, then also just try and make that. And if you only have that one point to make, just make it and make it well. And, everyone else can rabbit on for hours and hours. But if there's something you really want to say, just try and say it, because it probably will be hugely useful. And I don't see that as kind of working against your quiet or trying to push through it. I just see that as sort of trying to say the one thing that you think is really important to say, and you can sort of expand that out a little bit, and also not be afraid of saying things like, so if you need more time to digest points and prefer getting back to people in email, then just make that clear, and say, I think I'm better if I can get back to you in email after having a few days to think about it. Is that going to give you enough time? And often, invariably, unless you work in medicine maybe, or in the forces, or where there's some kind of real urgency or immediacy, that is usually okay. So I think, and that's just sort of widening the conversation about, different ways of working, different ways of communicating, highlighting that different people have different things that make work better for them. But I think often, and this can be the thing, I think that quieter people struggle with a bit, it's getting that across. I know that was my own experience. It's like, okay, well, this is what I need. How do I say that? Is it valid? Am I able to say it?
Yeah.
But I mean, maybe I've just been lucky with the people I've worked with, but the more I've sort of done that, the more I've been able to do it, and it's usually really well received. And I also think there's something in that, if you don't know, you don't try, or if you don't ask, then you won't know. And I think doing that bit by bit as well does build your kind of capacity to be a quiet person in the workplace in the way that works for you, and it allows other people to understand how you can be worked with as well. And I think that's the thing to remember. Often people won't know because they're coming from a different way of communicating, with different reasons why, so they won't necessarily be able to understand that. So I think it's almost like quieter people owe it to themselves to kind of say, this is what I need. And if it's then not met or completely shouted down, then that's a different conversation to sort of be having, or a different thing to think about. But I think at least in the initial stages, just try and say what you need with an ally, or with somebody who that can hear it.
That feels really helpful to me. And I think that one of the things we often have trouble with is trusting in ourselves. It feels rebellious. And I think when we're a quieter kind of person, we can have the tendency to go, well, there must be something wrong with me, and therefore I'm not going to speak up. I'm going to try and hide it and just try and catch up. Or you compare yourself to kind of your extroverted colleagues and think you should be keeping up with them or speaking up as much as they are. So we put kind of unnecessary pressures on ourselves as well. And what you're talking about is creating a level playing field for everyone, regardless of your communication style.
Yeah. And I think from what I've seen, in just teams that perform well, and this is from sort of lots of different areas, are the ones that have a real understanding of each other's kind of nuances and unique skills and abilities, and try as far as is possible to work with them, and sort of engage people in those differences and raise awareness of them. And that, it's basically raising relational awareness, and that can only be a good thing in every facet of life as far as I'm concerned, rather than sort of dictating certain things or suggesting even, sort of corporate, I'm just a little bit of a rant on corporate wellness programs. They've always been like one size fits all, which is kind of crazy. But when I was working at UK Sport, for example, instead of a gym membership, it was a healthy lifestyle benefit. So if you were somebody who wanted to go to dance classes instead, then that was available. And and it's sort of little things like that, which financially, I presume they make little difference to an organization, but they can make a huge difference to a group of employees who might have completely different ideas about what kind of movement or what's healthy for them. That would incorporate yoga or anything else as well. So it's they're sort of tiny little tweaks, but allow people to be more themselves at work. And I think that allows people to be more themselves, and then work, I think, you become more productive, more efficient, more engaged from that. So I think it's hugely important.
Absolutely. I think that really values everybody's uniqueness and just shows you that you're worthy if you receive something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that creates loyalty and trust, and but then I think I'm very much an idealist, so that's something I'd like to see. And I think there's often in the workplace, feel like we don't have enough time to do all of this because everyone's so busy delivering things operationally. But actually, if you put time into that, I think it can really reap rewards, long term. And yeah, I think there's so much in valuing difference, and thank God, we are seeing a world now that I think is becoming more open to that, and we're certainly seeing more diverse voices, I think, out there, in the media and in other spheres. I think, it's got a long way to go, but I certainly feel like that is happening. That is happening, and hopefully it has been, again, accelerated a little bit by the pandemic.
I hope so. And I feel like this is a really important conversation, because for most of us, the emphasis is on the individual to kind of grow their confidence, show up and be seen, use their voice. And there's not so much conversation around how we can change the environments around us to create that space for people to use their voice, or provide the reassurance, or stop sending the messages that we're not good enough, because we're quieter, and send a message that actually we value you. It's fascinating, isn't it? I know we've sort of spoken before that, certainly as I was growing up and sort of going sort of the early part of my career, it just felt like constantly, as a quieter person, you're always getting told that you need to be more confident, you need to be more this, you need to be more that. But nobody was telling any of the louder people that they need to be quieter, or perhaps take a bit more time to listen. And it's so frustrating, because it's like one is not better than the other. And it's not binary either. We've spoken about this before, that I think we all seem like so intent, maybe because of conditioning, to put people into groups or boxes, and it's just so much more subtle and or complex than that. It's sort of, I know that I can be very sort of, for want of a better word, loud in certain arenas, where I'm really passionate about something and really want to fight for it. And other times I'm not. And I'm sure that applies to everyone, and people who are very sort of confident and are great vocalists and sort of great speakers. I'm sure there are times when, or they need sort of quiet time to sort of recharge. So it's kind of, it's valuing that and understanding that as well, and probably not just trying to categorize everyone, or make everyone a data set, which I feel like that happens a lot too. So before we came on, we were talking about feeling the pressure to perform. Can you talk to us a little bit about feeling the pressure to perform?
Oh God, yeah. I suppose for me personally, and I noticed that it's a family trait as well, I think I always feel that, and I don't know why. I don't know where it comes from. I didn't have parents who were like, you need to be this thing, and you need to be, I didn't have that. So it's sort of been self-made pressure, I think. And I'm not going to say that there are probably elements of that coming from society as well, but I'm not going to blame society entirely, because I know it's sort of self-directed. And I think mine certainly was a form of perfectionism. I think it's changing now. I think my sister, probably my dad, suffer from the same thing, that if it's not going to be perfect, then we just sort of get a bit paralyzed, and that's super limiting. I think that pressure is getting, maybe it's sort of developing in two sort of parallel ways. On the one hand, I think it's getting worse because we live in a global society. We can see what everyone else is doing all the time, all over the world. There's pictures and videos of everything. So I think there is that kind of sense of everyone, even people who are sort of fairly immune to it, or who can handle it really well, I know still suffer from that. Or these people are doing that, and that's where I should be, because that's sort of the peer group that I recognize, or the space I feel I'm in. So I think it comes from there. But then I hope also with that, because there are now sort of more high profile people kind of speaking out against it, and sort of standing up for themselves in sort of like in terms of wider public sphere. I'd also like to think that there's something sort of running counter to that's trying to sort of balance it out. But again, as I say, I am ever the optimist, so I kind of tend to look at things in that way. But we were sort of talking about Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka, and how they've spoken out recently, and sort of effectively prioritize their health against their sort of media obligations, or the pressure of performing at like the highest level. And I think because I used to work in elite sport, I just see that as a huge thing. I think culturally that's massive. And I think they've both said, and I don't know if it was directly or not, but, you know, seeing other people start speaking out about this has enabled them to speak out about it. And really just, I think, enabled us all to look at athletes, or, you know, anyone who's performing at that sort of level and in that, you know, under that huge sort of public gaze, you know, they're people too, and they're no different from the rest of us, on one level. You know, I mean, certainly couldn't do gymnastics like Simone Biles, not even close. So and she's obviously streets ahead of, you know, the world in that sphere, but fundamentally, you know, I think, I mean, it takes so much bravery, I think, when you're operating at that level, to say, actually, no, I'm not going to do that because I need to prioritize my mental health. I think that's huge. And, you know, she's a young woman, and, you know, that really helps lots of other young women, or anyone who feels marginalized, perhaps because they're going through mental health issues or anything else that, you know, makes them feel like that. So I think that kind of thing can have a huge impact. And it's really sort of positive, I think, to see. So
yeah, I agree. And what feels really beautiful to me is that it bridges the gap, and yes, we feel more compassion for them, but we also see the sameness between us. And I think that this is probably the biggest problem in the world, that we just see so much difference between us and other people at the minute.
Hugely. And I think, I mean, this is one of the things I get sort of really passionate about, that we and I know I do this, but we, you know, have habits of putting certain people on pedestals and talking about them like they're sort of superhuman or completely different to us, and then you just get some athletes who completely sort of smash that. And I think Simone Biles, Naomi Osaka, Johnny Wilkinson is another one. He's he's written a lot about this, but there's a great podcast, the High Performance Podcast, which he's on, and, you know, he spends a lot of time talking about anxiety, how he didn't sleep, you know, and this is sort of one of the best rugby players of all time, who changed the game at the time. And I mean, I remember listening to that, and again, well, I can't relate to his success as a rugby player, you know, at all, but I could completely relate to those feelings of anxiety and, you know, insomnia and the stuff that he had to deal with. And it was hugely helpful to hear somebody like that talking about it and go, oh wow, you know, even when you're, you know, that good at something, that stuff doesn't go away. It's there, you know. And he talks about how he sort of managed it and eventually came to deal with it. I think, you know, he sort of meditation, Buddhism, all of these things, and it was just fascinating. And I think, but fascinating because I think, you know, we've created a world where we do like to paint people as perfect and like nothing can touch them. And then, you know, here's somebody who I admire as a sports person, but I actually, you know, admire him even more for talking the way he's talked about his mental health struggles. I just think that's incredible. And it's entirely relatable. And I think also, you know, we've spoken about, and I'm really interested in this as a sort of question conversation, about this sort of concept of high performance. It's certainly there in sport, in the elite sports world. I think working at Oxford University, you know, certainly lots of high performers there in the academic sphere. But what I think isn't talked about as much, or what people forget, is that I know the example we talked about earlier, you know, if you're a single parent who's managing a household and 2 or 3 kids, and you're managing to keep that together and, you know, do all of that well, that to me is also, you know, that's really high performing, because you don't have the resources that other people do in that sort of high performance world. You know, you're having to do it all on your own, within your own capability. And I you know, I'm fascinated by that as well. Like, that's not spoken about, and people in that world, you know, would never think of themselves as high performing. But actually, I think there's a real interesting kind of stream of thinking about that. And again, I say that because I think it's that thing about can we not just look at all people as people? And you know, there's lots of people doing incredibly well at life, who we'll never hear about, and I'm often really interested in those people. You know, it's like what have they got going on that we could, you know, that we could learn from. And I think often it's mindset, you know, and I sort of met people from lots of different backgrounds, you know, who haven't had any of those sort of resources or things available to them, yet they're flourishing in life. And I think that's really interesting. It's sort of, let's talk to them and find out what they're doing as well.
What do you think makes the difference?
I think mindset is the first thing that comes to mind. And that's something that I've really struggled with. You know, I feel like certainly when I've been in high periods of anxiety, or I've had, you know, really tough things to deal with, you know, my mindset can completely flip and I can become very negative and just sort of see all the bad stuff, when I know that in the grand scheme of things, you know, I've had a lot of privilege and supportive parents, and, you know, sort of financially okay and all of that stuff. So when I meet people, and this actually happens sort of through my work at Oxford as well, you know, who haven't had any of that, and yet they've got themselves sort of to this incredibly sort of high place, and they've done it all on their own. I think it's sort of a lot of grit, resilience, and ultimately mindset, you know, that sort of the ability to just turn things around. And, you know, it's amazing. It's so humbling when I meet people like that. I love it. It's like a real reminder. And I'd love to explore it more. I think this conversation has shown me that I really would love to explore that more, where that comes from. And yeah, are there parallels between, you know, sort of people who would put themselves in that bracket? And I'm sure there is lots of research out on there around it, but yeah, I'm always really, really sort of humbled and really grounded by it, and just think, oh, there's something in that.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued about what that difference in the mindset might look like.
Yeah, where it comes from, or just is it just your sort of the tools, whether you're aware of them or not, that you can use to turn things around in the moment, you know? So when things are really tough, you know, what do you do to kind of flip that and make it into a sort of growth opportunity, I think. But yeah, lots to think about.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that's coming up for me is the idea of completing the stress cycle. Physically, there are things that we have to do in order to tell our bodies that it's okay and the stress has moved on, because even if we can complete whatever was causing us the stress in the first place, even if we deal with that, we're left with that feeling of stress.
Yep.
So that might be, for some, it might be meditation or running or swimming or walking, or I don't know, so many different things that bring you joy. So what's the kind of things that help you?
Oh God. So this is something, I think, completing the stress cycle, it sounds very similar to, because I've had quite a lot of sort of somatic based therapy sessions. So I think it's sort of similar to that. So your body has a physical response, and I started that because I had a PTSD diagnosis after quite a difficult event that happened whilst I was traveling, and I've always had a predisposition towards anxiety anyway, and that's how I feel it very much in my body. And then somatic therapy sort of works with you to kind of actually work with the feelings. So it takes you sort of out of your head, which is where I spend far too much time and overanalyze everything, and works with the feelings in your body. And then you then kind of find ways of kind of working through that and sort of getting it out of your system, as it were. So it sounds very, very similar. For me, I think, definitely, I say definitely movement of all kinds. So dancing is my all-time favorite thing to do. I don't feel like I do enough of it, but it's one of those things, you know, I'm a terrible dancer, but when I'm doing it, I don't even think about that. I just love the feeling of it. I can completely switch off from everything. And, you know, as a self-conscious person, that's really interesting to me. What is it about dance where I don't care what I look like? I don't care if I look silly. The feeling is so good that who cares about that? So definitely dance. Anything in the water. I absolutely love swimming, and I love swimming because I like the way my body feels in the water. I mean, it's like this sort of multi-sensory experience. It's not, I don't even think of it like exercise. It's like just getting in for a 5-minute dip and getting out gives me as much kind of joy, pleasure, meditative space, feeling as if I'm going for an actual kind of 2 or 3K stomp. So definitely movement. I think singing and voice, again, I'm a terrible singer. It's something that I would love to be better at, but there really is something, and again, there've been studies into this, and it's about sort of synchrony of movement and voice. So I think for people who have anxiety, PTSD, being part of a choir actually is a really good sort of treatment therapeutic space, but it doesn't feel that way. You're sort of singing. So, and I think, as far as I'm aware, again, I'm not a scientist, so if anyone's listening to this who is, apologies for any mistakes I make, but that sort of connection with the vagal nerve, hugely important in any kind of anxiety, PTSD treatments. And I think there's just so much release in using your voice, which again is a really interesting thing to think about for quieter people. And that doesn't mean you go around shouting all the time, but what are ways that you can use your voice just to activate that sort of system, and kind of let that sort of emotion out, or release the stress. So probably dancing, anything to do with water. They're probably the top 3. There are many. I realized how much I just need to move. I was having another conversation with a friend who a guy who's ex-military, and he was saying something very similar. He said, I just want to move all the time, but you can't do that unless you're an elite athlete. It's like, I know, how do we do this? How do we facilitate this? So I mean, hugely important for me, and I think that's actually become a tool now. If I still have a tendency towards feeling stressed and overwhelm, I think I've realized overwhelm is like my nemesis. And if I get there and there's sort of, the way I regulate that is just actually put some music on and sort of just moving my body like a idiot around my kitchen, and that does tend to help. It does tend to temper it. So they're the things that I would definitely turn to, but there are many.
There is so much joy in just kitchen dancing and singing at the top of your lungs.
Totally underrated. Those 2 things, totally underrated.
It doesn't matter if you think you can sing or dance, just move. I think that this is really interesting that you've brought it up, actually, because when we're socially anxious, I mean, this isn't something that I used to do. I was very sort of closed and still. And of course, that's like how I was brought up, to be quiet and still and convenient, basically. So it's actually really, I think it's equally as scary and freeing to be moving like that. I can remember like going to discos when I was a kid and just standing there and like I couldn't move, and people were going, well, it's just easy, just move your arms, and getting frustrated with me, but I just couldn't do it at the time.
And I completely understand that. I think there's also something probably about British culture. I know I got a bit of a rude awakening, but it was brilliant. When I was I think I'd just finished university and I was doing a temp job. I can't even remember what it was. It's like some sort of translation exercise, like down in the archives. But there were lots of other people who were working with me from various bits of the university. One was Indian, one was Greek, and I can't remember where the other person was from, but anyway, in their cultures they have this incredible sort of dancing culture. So any sort of Greek kind of celebration or wedding or even just a dinner, people tend to dance afterwards. And we did a lot of things socially together, and I just recognized how for that was just completely normal, and it's this thing, isn't it, I think people love dancing, Brits love dancing as well, and not that it's necessarily about sort of where you're from or what your nationality or citizenship is, but it's like we can only do it when we've had loads and loads of booze, and that again, that's fascinating. I think other cultures are just better at doing it, and certainly Latin cultures as well. There's so much more vibrancy and sort of linked to sort of movement in the arts. I feel anyway, that's what I've seen when I've traveled, and I think it is here, but just there's this sort of like super serious air about it. It has to be done in a certain way, and it's just, I just feel like we need to get rid of that. Just get rid of that.
That would be so lovely. Just hearing you talk about this culture of dancing, and that just kind of lights me up, and I just really love the idea of that, and it'd be wonderful if we could have that here. I notice
Yeah.
even in, like, 5-year-old kids in my family, there's not a lot of movement there, and I'll be like dancing away in the car, and she's just looking at me like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And she won't join in. She's just too afraid to
Oh.
already the movement is kind of getting shut down in
Yeah.
our kids. So
Yeah. There's so much, isn't there? I think all of us, all of this stuff, I think whatever our stuff is, or our angst, or our shadows, or whatever, it starts so early, and
yes.
we often don't know it's there until later, and then you're sort of having to navigate it and sort of work out why. Yeah. But I just think, movement, I just think, is absolutely, whatever works for you. I'm not like sort of talking about it like it doesn't have to be a sport, it doesn't have to be dance, it doesn't have to be anything, but just something, whatever makes you feel alive, I think is the thing that you need to be doing more of. And that could be writing poetry, it could be making sand art, it could be anything, but if that makes you feel like you, do more of that, and then it impacts everything else for the better.
I have to say that it's not always comfortable work either, but it's like in that discomfort that we really truly grow. And I mean, I met you on that Blue Health coaching course. You're also a Blue Health coach, and I don't think I've gotten through a coaching course yet where I'm not having some kind of like uncomfortable experience growing and crying through it.
Yeah. No, I agree completely. I mean, I remember from the Blue Health coaching course, we sort of had to tell each other our life story, and then stuff comes up there that you're like, oh my God, I haven't thought about that for a long time, and it's still really deep. And I'm studying elite athlete wellbeing management at the moment. It's a great course. It's really, really involved. It's run by an Australian organization, and we had to do a similar thing. So we were paired up. I had to do a life story exercise, and I was actually paired with a professional player. Like, he's just retired. Very different background to me, and it was also, so it was difficult, but also the most amazing thing, because you spend, and this is sort of one of the benefits, talk about sort of quieter qualities. You spend an hour listening to somebody else's life story and their biggest achievements, their biggest regrets, the hardest things they've worked through. You learn so much about another person, but you learn so much about yourself as well. And I think both of those experiences, recent experiences, have really stuck with me. And you're right, it's not easy facing that stuff, it never is, but on the other side of it, I just think it enables you to build better relationships, and in work, in life, sort of romantic relationships, whatever. And at the end of the day, I think once we get to the end of all of this, that's the stuff that matters, right? So but I think it's important to have support around if you're facing all of that kind of stuff.
Definitely.
And that the Blue Health coaching was fantastic, because everyone was just so kind of warm and open and supportive. So it's good. I definitely need to get down to Cornwall to see you all soon.
I look forward to that. So you mentioned significant achievements in your life. Tell us what your most significant achievement is in your mind.
Oh God.
Or like, what's the biggest comfort zone stretch?
Yeah. Okay. So significant achievement, and it's quite a fun one. I'm going to go with one fun and one not so fun, but still a significant achievement. I think was coming third at, we did a charity Strictly Come Dancing competition in Oxford. And that involved training. I think we were training for 12 weeks. And we had to learn a Latin and a ballroom, and then do a group performance, and then something else. And I think I'm going to say a significant achievement wasn't so much about coming third, it was more about coming back to myself, because that's when, that was in May 2017, and I'd had the PTSD diagnosis in the January, and was really, really struggling. And then I think that came along at the right time, because it gave me purpose, and it enabled, I was sort of working through it, doing something I loved, with a group of people, and the aim was to raise lots of money for charity. And I think we raised about 25 grand. So, it was everything about that, I think, was just, it was just awesome. So it wasn't really about the third place. It was more about, I suppose, starting to overcome quite a tough time in my life, but through something that I really loved, and then the corollary, of raising so much money for charity. So it was like, that was a pretty cool thing. I tend to look, I think, at things like that, and it was a big sort of team effort. So that's probably maybe that's both, actually, significant achievement and comfort zone stretch, because even though I love dancing, I think performing is really hard. I suffer hugely with performance anxiety, but for that experience, actually, I just love, it was the good side of adrenaline. It was actually just hugely kind of connecting, and really, it's the most present I've ever felt. I can still feel that feeling, particularly when we did our group dance, which was to Pirates of the Caribbean, and it was a paso. So it was all, completely not my personality, like very sort of fierce and Latin and just awesome. And just to channel that kind of emotion instead of, my usual fairly calm-ish steady state was just brilliant, actually. And thank you for asking that question, because I haven't thought about that like that in a while, and it was awesome. But I think with the combined kind of benefit of really starting to work through what was going on in my mind and my body, I think, at that time.
That sounds incredible. Again, you've brought up about having that, not so much support, but being part of something bigger. And I think that a lot of the time we feel like we are on our own, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. We feel like that we keep ourselves to ourselves, and we don't reach out and connect, or we don't become part of something, because it is scary. And what if we fall? What if we fail? And I think that this is a really key part of growing our quiet confidence and coming back to who we are, is actually being around other people and having these joyful moments and those deeper connections.
So true. I think, as you were saying that, I realized, I mean, it's taken me years to feel like I actually belonged anywhere, and that's not because the people around me before weren't open to that. I think I could have belonged, but because of my internal feelings and state, I just feel like I didn't, and I felt like I wasn't good enough to belong to some of the groups that I was part of, and I didn't fit in for that reason, and a lot of the time that was my own internal stuff. And I think that's been one of the biggest changes, actually. And I'd say, I'm going to be really honest, I'd say that's probably only changed in the last 5-6 years, and that tied in with when I left law, going through that horrible experience of PTSD, and really having to face my demons, and then starting with Strictly. And I think that really was the start of the journey to just kind of go, okay, well, I want to do things that are really in line with who I am, and I need to be true to myself and be okay with that. And it's hugely releasing. It's just I realize all of that stuff that I was feeling when I was younger, you can start to let go of that. But I think belonging is a huge thing, and super hard, actually, as well, if you do have a tendency towards anxiety or social anxiety. Super hard.
And you're right, we have to kind of belong to ourselves before we find it externally.
As soon as you belong to yourself, then you start meeting the right people, and you start, I think you're presenting your real self, so that the people that are coming into your life then are the ones who are going to kind of meet you there. Which is really, it's really exciting.
It is
just amazing when that happens.
It is, and it's just the law of attraction, really, isn't it?
Definitely. And it's just so painful. I know when I again speak to sort of some of the young people I work with, that the feeling of not belonging as well is so damaging. It's so it's just a really tough thing to navigate. I hope people can kind of reach out more about that. And I feel like that's where my work is taking me, sort of to help people sort of navigate that space if that's what they're feeling when they're younger.
Yeah, it's so needed. It's so common. What message would you give to those people who are feeling like they don't belong?
Check in with those times where you feel calm in yourself, and when you feel like you are being you and you're not feeling anxiety, because they probably hold the key to who you are. And I really think if you know who you are, and that's sort of, I think, what your values are, what you like doing, what you feel really strongly about, what you want to fight for, I think that's when you're able to kind of really find belonging. You know, if you're staying true to who you are, and it sounds really cheesy when you say it on a podcast like this, but I really think, you know, authenticity and belief in yourself, and belief that whatever your version of authenticity is will lead you to other people who can meet you there, and that's when you truly belong.
Yes, yeah. It's the key to finding your tribe.
Yeah. And so much can change from that
Yeah.
once you're there. Yeah.
I love that. That feels really useful, because so often we're in a place where we are trying to shape ourselves to fit in so that we can feel belonging. But what you're saying is, let's do it the other way around. Let's really find out who we are, and then go out and pursue those things that light us up. And then we will find belonging, and it will be natural. We don't have to work for it.
No. And I think, you know, it's another sort of one of my, just again, I suppose, questions that I'm really interested in. I think our schooling system goes a long way to taking us away from that, because we're, you know, thrust in, all doing the same exams, all using the same modality to be assessed. And I just really question where the value is in that. I really do. You know, like, even for people who can ace exams, it's like, generally they're not developing themselves. They're just trying to ace an exam. So there's, even if they do well out of that, they're still kind of doing what somebody else wants them to do to get a grade, rather than going, okay, well, where are my innate skills, abilities, qualities? Where are the things I want to use? What are the subject areas what are they? You know, it's I think there's something in that, that's quite an interesting conversation, an interesting discussion, because I don't think it lends itself well to that. And then the other one is, I think a lot of people feel like it's quite a selfish approach. You know, if we focus on ourselves and what we want, and then we excluding everyone else. But as long as that's run in line with celebrating difference and understanding how, you know, different people, different skills, different qualities can work together, I don't think it can be a bad thing, and I don't think it's a selfish thing.
Yeah.
But it's another one of those things that starts really young. We're sort of funneled into a system, and that takes us away from perhaps pursuing some of those things, unless we're lucky, unless we've got supportive communities around, or, you know, that one person who champions that. It can be really hard, I think, to sort of find out who you are. You know, even if you are high achieving, it's sort of, you know, sometimes that can take you away from alignment with those things that make you really happy.
Absolutely. And I was, you know, the good little girl with the grades, and then I kind of was like, what am I going to do with it? I didn't feel like I could speak up. I didn't feel like I could go out and get a job and be accepted. I thought people will see the real me and reject me. So, you know, without that self-belief and without that confidence, then I couldn't use what I had to, you know, learn anyway.
It's a really, really interesting space. And I mean, I think it's really exciting that there are sort of forest schools and beach schools. And one of my colleagues was talking about, I think, the development of there's now a GCSE in natural history, which sounds like it's going to be much more kind of engaging with the natural world, rather than just sort of reading stuff out of books. And those kinds of things are exciting, because it feels like bringing more, you know, you're connecting more with the world, and learning that way, and learning about, you know, what might interest you from that. Because if you connect with the natural world, that could take you into a creative space because of the beauty of nature, or it could take you into a sort of exploring space, or a, you know, geological space, or a scientific, you know, I think there are just different ways of kind of engaging with learning, and different ways of learning. You know, not everyone wants to read books and then write exams. You know, maybe they want to learn something and then act it out, or you know, kind of but again, you know, I guess the difficulty is, you know, how do we sort of do that for everyone? You know, there's so many people, and in an ideal world we would be able to, but yeah. I guess that's a whole other conversation.
I know that you are really connected to the natural world.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me how that connection shapes how you feel about yourself.
Oh God, I think it's awe. I think what it is, you know, I realize I sort of soaked some sunflower seeds the other day and planted them. And I know it's the wrong time for any gardeners who are listening, I know it's the wrong time of year to do that and all the rest of it. But I was just fascinated by just watching this kind of seed root, and then watching it grow, and then seeing the differences every day. And this is like one tiny thing, you know, and that's my experience of the natural world. Like whatever I see in it, I am in awe of it, and it sort of asks for nothing. You know, these cycles of things happen, and it teaches me about myself. So even something really simple or basic, like looking after houseplants, you realize how much water they need, how much they change each day. You know, if it's a really hot day, they kind of wither and die, and you need to give them extra care. Like that applies to people as well. You know, we need to be looking after ourselves and be as aware of that kind of thing, you know, in ourselves. So it's just taking, well, not even taking, I feel like I learn from nature, like, because we are nature, like humans are nature. You know, we're no more special than any other species on the planet. Like I've just read a great sort of neuroscience book, and it's written by Lisa Feldman Barrett, and she sort of makes that statement, like we're no different. We have a different way of doing things maybe, or a slightly different brain, but ultimately we're the same. And I think, yeah, just being really connected to the natural world reminds me of that. And I love, just as I say, going out. I live near some meadows in Oxford, and just walking there every day. And you know, some people might say, well, don't you get bored of that? And I'm like, well, no, because it's different every day. It's the same space, but there's something different. You go at a different time of day, you see different things. I've been going more in the evening lately, and I've seen, you know, there's roe deer and foxes and all sorts of different birds. And for me, that just feels like a treat, and it costs nothing. You take away nothing by looking at it. It's taking away nothing from you. And I don't know. I just think like the closer we are to nature, the better we can be as humans. Because it connects us again with, you know, fundamentally who we are. You know, it's quite grounding. And I was saying to somebody the other day, you know, like there's been all this stuff about Branson and Jeff Bezos going up to space, and I'm like, well, I was actually more in awe of my little sunflower seeds than that, because this sort of like natural cycle of something growing is constantly giving back, and it's accepting of its kind of life cycle, and there's no ego involved. And again, that might sound a little bit woo-woo or out there, but I genuinely mean it. I was like, I am more in, I just think that's more fascinating and more exciting. And I think if we move away from that and only get excited by kind of growth, economic growth, and you know, power and money and profit, I just think there's an end point to that, and it's not going to end very well for anyone. Whereas, yeah, if we're more accepting of, or just humbled by that kind of natural process. I don't know, for me that just makes sense. Like that makes so much sense. I understand other people might listen to this and be like, oh god, she's gone off the wall, but so it gives me a sense of wonder and awe every day, even in something that's really small.
I love that. And yeah, I agree, the more connected we are with nature, the more connected we are to ourselves and with other people. I think you can look out at sea and realize, yes, I'm this like tiny pinprick on the world, but actually so is everybody else, and together we can achieve so much. And moving away from that, I think that it feels isolating to be that more focused on ego and money and achievement in that light. There's something about coming back to that connection first.
There certainly is for me. And I just, I just feel like there's so much simplicity in that. And I could talk about that forever, because it's like a genuine love, when you just realize like how deeply ingrained something is in you. And I couldn't live without it. I actually moved to where I moved so I could be next to the river and next to the meadows, and so I could sort of be in them every day. And me, I think like the sea is my first love, and it always will be, but work and everything else sort of keeps me here for now. But I think just being by your own little chunk of nature that works for you, like I think it's just constantly, it's like life-giving but you're not taking anything away.
Absolutely.
And I think that's really nice.
Oh, thank you for sharing that, Lara. So I'm wondering, what would you say to your younger self if you could send a message back?
God, I mean, to my younger self, I just wish I said, like, just be you, it will all be okay. Like, it's really straightforward. I don't know if my younger self would have listened to it, but that's what I needed to hear. Like, just be okay with being you. Like, it's fine, it will all be fine.
Some much needed reassurance there. I'm sure we could all use a little bit more of that. So my final question for you, Lara, is what is inspiring you right now?
Oh God, the Olympics are inspiring me. It's like, I just it brings up so much emotion, it's like, and it allows us to feel like, if you have that connection, and it's all the stories, like, and obviously I'm a swimmer, so I really love the swimming. And there's a guy who's in lane 8 from Tunisia, like no one was even looking at him, and he won, I can't remember what event it was. God, I only saw it the other day. But anyway, from nowhere, kind of won this event. He's 18. Like, it's one of the stories of the games, and I just find so much inspiration from that. And I think just people having, Simone Biles saying what she said. People being brave enough to kind of say what they need. I think that inspires me. And I think particularly sort of young women when they're doing it as well, because I think it's often harder for them. And I think that does really inspire me. Well, there's quite a lot. I feel like I'm inspired by a lot of things, but I'll stop there, otherwise I will bitter on.
I've heard athletes talking about how it's supposed to be fun.
Yeah.
And that is something that's really inspired me recently too.
Yeah. And I think there's so much, when you hear the athletes who often do really well, they love it. They love what they do. And I think you've got to, and they work so hard, so bloody hard, but they love it. And they love that feeling of working hard and remembering that it should be fun. We can all learn a lot from that. And I think I need to remember that often.
Me too.
And if it's not fun, sort of ask why, and can you make it fun? And if not, then ask yourself why you're doing it.
Okay, and with that, I am going to go and have a fun dance around my kitchen.
Me too.
It's been so lovely chatting with you, Lara.
Yeah, you too, Hayley. Always a pleasure. Hopefully I didn't go on too much.
No.
Talking about being a quiet person.
Before we go, where can people connect with you?
So I am sporadically on Instagram. So they're at lara.hayward. LinkedIn as well. So if you just search for me, Lara Hayward, I should pop up, I hope. And I do have my own website as well, but that is currently undergoing some updating, but that's just www.larahayward.com. So yeah, any of those 3 places. If people have any questions or they want to get in touch, or if anything we talked about kind of resonates with them, I would love to hear from you as well. So yeah, do feel free to say hello.
Perfect, thank you. And I will pop all those links on the show notes for this episode. If you've also enjoyed hearing from Lara, make sure that you check out her workshops on reframing quiet as a strength in your career and thriving in the workplace as a quieter person, which you can find available for free at quietconnections.co.uk/webinars. Head over there now for a link to watch on demand for more specific workplace insights for us quieter ones. And Stacey will be back next week with a beautiful episode all about hope. So join us then. In the meantime, do stay connected.